Hey everyone. In a totally not that surprising decision, the court has ruled in favor of the state in the Brian Walshe case about the digital evidence. If you haven't been here along the way, the Brian Walshe case is a case about Anna Walshe who went missing, and Brian became the suspect really fast. And he's set to stand trial in October for the unaliving of his wife, but there's no body. The evidence is mostly digital. That's why we have had this fight over some Google searches found on his son's iPad. And just to make everything a little more spicy, Michael Proctor, the former trooper, is also in this case. And wherever Michael Proctor goes, there's a big chance that cases can get proctored. But what is it we're talking about? Since Anna Walshe was last seen early on January 1st in 2023, Brian said, well, she'd gone back to DC for work, but there was never any proof that she left the house. There was no plane tickets, no Uber. There was nothing. No one ever saw her again. And her employer was the one who reported her missing. The prosecution believed that Brian unalived her in their home, cut her into pieces, and dumped her around town in dumpsters, maybe one dumpster, maybe more. Somewhere near his mom's condo is one of the dumpsters. Police have found a hacksaw, some trash bags with Anna's clothing in it, and some jewelry, and a small piece of bone. But that's about all the evidence they had gathered. That's not a lot to prove he did it. But then how do they come to a first degree unaliving charge? And they also charged him with misleading the investigators and improper transportation of a body. And how did we come to this from a hacksaw? Well, all of this evidence in this case will be circumstantial. There's some DNA, there's some phone data, and then we have the big thing that was in question in the ruling that we had today. Could the state give the Google searches found on his son's iPad as evidence in the trial? We are talking about Google searches who, well, I want to say how long before a body starts to smell, but how long before a body starts to smell can you be charged with unaliving without a body? Not the most subtle Google searches. And this is where the case rests, because there's no obvious cause of unaliving. So they want to show that he intended to kill her with these Google searches. And these Google searches are good Google searches for the state. There's no ifs, buts about it. Tell this to a jury. And again, as I always say, lawyers might tell you something different, but yeah, it's not about the law when you're in the courtroom. It is about how you can make the jury feel. And if you get to read from his son's iPad that he had Googled how to get away with murder, it's going to be really bad for Michael Walshe. But the defense had been fighting to suppress this because Brian only gave consent to the police to search for messages between him and Anna, not a full forensic dump of all of his devices. And they say that this police just used that consent to go way beyond the scope of what was allowed. And they never really got a proper warrant. And let's just say, with Michael Proctor on the team, who would have been surprised that they didn't follow the rules? If they had been able to get this tossed out, it would have been a very weak circumstantial case. And is it enough to have some DNA on a hacksaw? Maybe. And a guy who's convicted of other crimes? Potentially, yes. But still, this this digital evidence is gold for a prosecutor. And again, whenever Proctor's name pops up in anything after the Karen Read case, he always makes me wonder, how bad did they really do when they investigated this? He used to be the lead investigator in the Walshe case, and the defense have hammered him because they claim, like in the Karen Read case, he didn't document the chain of custody on key evidence. We don't know where Brian's iPad was. Bev Canoni didn't care about that. Maybe this judge would do it. And then we also have the thing where Brian claims he was misled about the scope of the search. Did Proctor tell him, yeah, we're just going to look on your messages, so they could toss the rest of it? This was all brought up in a hearing earlier this year. And at that hearing, the defense was still trying to dig through Proctor's notes and records. And it's not because they think that the key to winning the case is in the documents, most likely. It's more likely that they are believing, with Proctor's bad behavior, and as we saw it in Karen Read's case, that could be enough to raise doubt. And with the Google searches in, you need to raise a lot of doubt. But today, Judge Diane Ferrenier have ruled that the Google searches will stay in. She believes that Brian had given voluntary consent and that the evidence were in plain view. This cannot be sold as anything other than a major win for the prosecution. Not everything they wanted to put in there made it through. She did suppress some of the data, but it was tracking devices on Brian's mom's car and some old phone records. Not that important. But for the defense, this was a punch in the face. The main digital evidence, the very, very damning digital evidence, will stay in the case. This will be read in front of a jury, and I think that will give him a very, very steep hill to climb. I think this was what the state needed to get a conviction. There's still ongoing battles about some DNA and stuff like that, but I think the big thing in this case will be those searches. There's no doubt if these searches had been thrown out, it would have been a very different case. There's no body, there's no weapon they can point to, there's no premeditation, just a missing woman and a suspicious husband, and of course, a lead investigator with some credibility issues. But now this is in, I think the state has a very good case to get through to get a conviction. They claim they won't call Proctor. Will the defense do it? Most likely, because he is not a good name in any court right now. Everything he has touched has been proctored. So they might try and get him in there to raise some form of reasonable doubt. But with the Google searches in, this isn't just a hill. This is a mountain they have to climb. They are very damning to Brian Walshe. And looking at the totality of the evidence, yeah, there's a high likelihood he did it. But that doesn't mean that the state can just roll over someone they accuse of something. They have to prove it still. And rather 100 guilty goes free than one innocent goes to prison. And everything Proctor touches is bad because that guy didn't follow the rules. So we will keep an eye on it and most likely cover it when it comes up to court. I think the state has enough. Let me know if you think the same, but it's no surprise the judge ruled in favor of the state. It's Massachusetts, you know.